Tell us about a time when a random encounter on the road nearly cost you your life.
This encounter happened in the summer of 2006 when I was 20 years old. I didn't get my driver's license until January of that year, and driving opened up so many doors for me that I took a lot of solo road trips to my friends' houses in New England mid-Atlantic states. I also look young for my age and was often mistaken for a high school student in my early 20s. I was driving alone on I-78 on a random July day on my way to visit my friend in southern PA for a long weekend. Her parents were away and we had the house to ourselves and were planning on drinking hot tubbing and watching Planet Earth drunk. It had just come out. Maybe run around some cornfields at night. I was so excited and had a great drive, listening to good music, and it was a beautiful day for driving. Right after I crossed the border from New Jersey into Pennsylvania, I stopped at one of the first rest stops to get gas and snacks for the last part of my drive. I've tried to figure out which rest stop this was and can't ID it, but it was a gas station with a large mini-mart. Opposite the gas station was the on-ramp back to I-78 West, and parallel to the on-ramp was a dirt road which comes into play later. I was heading into the store when a man in his late 30s, early 40s approached me. He was a stocky guy, decently tall. I'm 5 feet 1 inch. Had on a plain black tee and jeans with dark brown hair and mustache goatee. He had a super intense gaze and immediately creeped me out. He just had a crazy energy about him. I don't really get vibes from people that often, but this was so strange. He stood too close. His gaze was crazy, direct, focused. His word choice was strange. Immediately set off all my alarms. He asked if I was from the area, despite my Connecticut license plate, where I was headed, and if I knew of anything fun to do, because he had plans later and time to kill beforehand. He invited me to go play mini golf or watch a movie with him. I didn't answer any of his questions, declined his invitation to hang out, and told him I didn't know the area, and walked away towards the store. I was blown away that he asked me to go somewhere with him. It was so random and uncomfortable. As I was walking away, he actually screamed out, "You're gorgeous!" And the volume and tone made my hair stand on end. It was super aggressive and inappropriate, and he startled a family walking out of the store. It was so loud. I didn't turn around, but went inside. He came into the store shortly after and was staring at me, so I went to use the bathroom and stayed in for at least 10 minutes texting my friend about this creep. When I came out, he wasn't in the store anymore, so I took my time buying drinks and snacks, sour bright crawlers and trail mix being my obligatory road trip food, and went out to gas up my car. I was relieved his car was gone and started thinking about the rest of my drive and getting excited to see my friend. When I pull up to the road to get back on the highway, I hear someone persistently honking his horn and see this creep show on the dirt road parallel to the on-ramp in his truck honking, shouting, and waving at me to drive over to him. He was directly facing the gas station and had been waiting for me to pull up. I immediately freaked out and jumped on the on-ramp back onto I-78. He pulled onto the highway after me, and I called my friend extremely scared. I drove so fast, and probably dangerously, and looking back, am lucky that I didn't get into an accident, but I didn't know what to do. He didn't follow me for that long, and I think after a few exits, he pulled off. My friend and I had a backup plan that if I saw his car again, she would direct me to a police station the next town over from her house instead of my going directly there and leading some freak to us. I didn't see the car again and went to my friend's, but the last hours of my drive, I was extremely tense and anxious. I remember checking my mirrors regularly for this black pickup truck. It all ended well. I got to my friend's house safely, and we had a nice weekend. The encounter was definitely creepy, but over the years I didn't put much thought into it. A few years ago, approximately 2014, I was talking with another friend who is big into serial killers and mentioned my encounter, jokingly suggesting this was a serial killer I had met, and told her my experience. She was fascinated and wanted to Google active serial killers in the Pennsylvania area at the time. The first hit was for Adam Leroy Lane, and he looked almost exactly like the man I met back in 2006. Obviously, it could be my mind filling in the blanks, but the basic characteristics, 40s, tall but stocky, brown hair with mustache goatee, and the time area all match. In my memory, he was a little bit slimmer than the pictures, and it was 2006, not 2007, when he was actually convicted of murdering women. Still, it's an odd coincidence and one I've never forgotten.
Do not let your Uber driver cancel your ride while in the car.
Sorry, this is a bit long. I know this isn't a therapist office, but this has bothered me for a long time and I wanted to just get it off my chest. This happened June 2018 in Portland, Oregon. I understand I acted like an idiot in this situation. Since then, I have become much more observant, cautious, and honestly, much more paranoid. I went dancing with friends, was really drunk by midnight. Unfortunately, this was back when I had little money, and I realized you could save money by eating very little before going out, and it would take far fewer drinks to get drunk. So, I was so drunk I barely remember my friend ordering me an Uber home. My phone was dead, of course. I can vaguely recall them helping me into the car and telling me to get home safe. I don't remember greeting the driver or the first minute or so, but soon after getting in, he asked how my night was and if I smoked. Honestly, I was just thinking about bed at this point, so I sort of just slurred out that I did sometimes. He then offered me a joint, and this is the first moment I get sort of nervous and begin paying attention. I tell him something like, I'm really tired and just ready to get home. I think he said something about it being an indica-based joint, and it made for great sleep. Once again, I say something not exactly like no, but not a yes, which he takes as a, yes, I'll take that joint now. Once again, I'm still drunk enough I can barely see straight or speak clearly, so when he says, okay, well, I have to cancel the ride really quick because I can't give it to you while I'm on the clock, or something to that effect. It takes me a second to realize how dangerous that is, and by the time I start to say something, he has canceled the ride and pulls over. We were in an air just east of the Hawthorne Bridge, I think, and it was totally secluded. Some empty parking lots, a closed auto body shop, no one in sight. It's starting to hit me. I'm now in the car, not with an Uber driver, but with some stranger. I can't call anyone, and he's trying to give me weed that could have anything in it. For the next minute or so, we're pretty quiet, or I just can't remember any small talk he tried to make because I was beginning to panic, and every time he handed me the joint, I would take fake hits, just breathing it into my mouth and not into my lungs. I felt tired, clumsy, and weak. That kind of drunk where you're almost at the point of nausea, and I knew I couldn't do much of anything to defend myself at that point. I remember vividly being fixated for a moment on the fact I didn't even have a pair of keys to defend myself with, as my building used fobs for just about everything, and I didn't take my mail key with me. As I'm freaking out, I look up to see if this guy is sort of noticing, and I make eye contact with him in the mirror. He was staring at me, but I couldn't read his expression. Finally, he says something along the lines of, well, let's get out here. I tell him I'll just call another Uber to get home, thinking at this point it might even be safer to walk. And he says, no, I still have your address, I'll just take you home. For a moment, I was relieved. I guess I wanted to believe him so badly that I would get home safe. I believed him. I tried to calm myself down, thinking he hadn't actually done anything threatening. Maybe he was just your typical stoner guy, and I'm overreacting. At this time, I lived on PSU campus in downtown Portland in the southwest area of the city. He is driving me north on the east side of the river. There are several bridges to our left, and as he keeps moving north, he has several opportunities to take an exit to hop over the river and get me back downtown. He keeps skipping them. We keep passing bridge after bridge that could get me home. Up in northeast Portland, there are some large industrial areas that can get very isolated at night, and Portland in general is surrounded by lots of forests. So I knew he could have me in a secluded area in really quickly. After he passes like the fourth exit for a bridge, pretty sure it was the Broadway Bridge, I've been racking my brain for a way to make him actually take me home and say something to the effect of, "Hey, my boyfriend is waiting for me at home." Which was true, though I said it in a very meek way. My driver says nothing, but he did take the next exit for a bridge and basically hung a giant U-turn that started taking me home. Even as we're on the west side of town heading south, I'm still shaking and have my hand on the door handle, thinking about just hopping out at a red light the closer we get to my apartment. My phone is completely dead, and he honestly still has several chances to hop onto nearby highways and speed out of the city. We're getting pretty close to my apartment now, and I'm once again trying to convince myself I'm being paranoid about some stoner that can't navigate the city, although a few minutes before, I was so scared I was crying. So, once we get about 2 blocks from my apartment, I lie and tell him it's easiest to stop here, and he can let me out. Again, he doesn't say anything but does slow the car. I'm flooded with relief and even feel myself smile, but when I go to open the door, it's locked. I try to lift the lock mechanism manually, but it won't budge. I look up at him instinctually to see what's up, and he's got his head turned almost fully toward me, shoulders still facing the road, smiling at me. The worst fucking smile I've ever seen. It looked so mocking, and it just did not reach his eyes at all. I just started crying and asking him to open the door. I was so freaked out and still very drunk, and thank God he did. I will never forget the sensation of vulnerability, not just being drunk in his car with no way to contact anyone, but even as I got out of the car, I kept feeling like he would somehow grab the back of my shirt and pull me back in. As silly as that sounds. When I got home, I found out my boyfriend had actually gone out with friends last minute and wasn't even home. He wouldn't even have known till much later if I hadn't gotten back safe. The next day, I convinced myself I was freaking out over nothing, which I realize still could be the case. But in my gut, I had truly felt in danger the night before. Technically, this guy could have been totally harmless, but I still think I should have texted my friend and had her report him. The big thing that made me think of this was recently hearing about how Ed Kemper, co-ed killer, would go for practice runs, picking up hitchhikers and seeing if he could get the passengers, potential victims, to trust him, or how far out of his comfort zone he could push them without them saying anything. Obviously, this guy wasn't Ed Kemper, but I hate wondering if that night was a practice run of sorts for my Uber driver.
Almost gave a serial killer a car ride.
So, a little background here. My father was in the Army for 21 years, retired and moved to a very small town in Central Florida. He got bored after a couple of years, and even though we didn't need the money, between his retirement and what my mom was making as a bookkeeper tax prep, he wanted to go back to work. He started working at various gas stations, and it being a small town, the owners wouldn't care if I came there and helped him out with stocking the coolers or even running the register, as long as I didn't sell any beer or smokes. This all took place in the late 80s and early 90s. The actual story I'm going to tell took place in 1990, and I remember the date well because it was shortly after my birthday, and being 15 in Florida, I had just gotten my learner's permit, and my dad would let me drive him to and from work just to get some experience on the road, both at day and at night. I was sitting in my usual spot at a table that was set up along the windows, book in hand, feet propped up, and a Mountain Dew on the table, along with some snacks. I would generally spend most of the evening that way, reading books, getting up to run the register, stock the cooler at different times. I remember glancing up because something caught my attention that was unusual, and I realized that a lady was walking up our parking lot from the direction of the interstate. The gas station was right on I-75. This in itself was really strange because where we were located, you didn't get many people walking, and definitely not walking from the direction of the interstate. I figured she had broken down somewhere and was coming to use the phone to call for a tow truck or something. I was completely wrong. She came into the store, looked around for a few minutes, and I remember getting just a strange and creepy feeling about her. She walked up to the counter and started telling my dad a story about how she had gotten stranded and needed a ride up to the next big town up north from us. Ocala was the town. This is important. My dad lets her know that he's working, and there is no way that he can take her. She turns and looks at me, and while she is looking away from him, my dad catches my eye and subtly shakes his head no. I was confused for a second, but then she turns back to my dad and points at me, asking if I can take her. My dad responded back that I only had a learner's permit and wouldn't be able to drive her anywhere, and then drive back. Normally, I would have done it, even though it was illegal, because I'd done it a few times before already. I didn't argue with my dad since this was completely out of character for him. He was normally chatty with the customers, but for whatever reason he was almost curt and dismissive of her. Turns out he had a bad vibe about her from the minute he had seen her walking up the drive. Well, she cusses him for a minute, and he basically tells her to get out of the store. She slammed the door open. I thought the glass was going to break from how hard she had slammed it, and then she stalks out of the store and down the driveway. I keep an eye on her and continue to watch as she makes her way back up to the interstate and then starts up the northbound on-ramp. Almost a year passes and I'm in my bedroom, less than a week before my 16th birthday. I hear my dad yelling from the living room, "Son, get your ass in here and look at this." I quickly run to the living room and see my dad pointing at the TV and look at the mugshot of the lady up on the screen and immediately remember the lady who had been in the store. Turns out I almost gave a car ride to Aileen Wuornos, who was later convicted of being a serial murderer and then later put to death. Still have nightmares about what could have happened.
Missed being killed by a serial killer.
Back in about 2000 or 2001, I was driving by myself from visiting my mom in Colorado back to Arizona. I was in a station wagon and had a desk my mom had given me that was my grandfather's. I've always been scared driving at night that there is someone in my back seat that is going to get me. This might be because of too many scary movies or because my mom's paranoia rubbed off on me. I was in the army and drove back and forth a lot to visit her. She would get mad at me for sleeping at rest stops or gas stations and tell me someone was going to kidnap me and kill me. But I just didn't want to be bothered with the hassle and expense of a motel most of the time. I digress. So I'm driving an empty stretch of highway late at night with no other cars around. This red truck comes up behind me, flashing his lights and honking his horn at me. I was thinking to myself that there was something wrong with my car, or maybe there was something wrong with the desk in the hatchback. Because why else would he be so insistent on me pulling over? So I pull over. I was in my mid-20s and still a bit naive, and get out of my car. As I am getting out of my car, he's directly behind me and still flashing his lights and honking his horn. I got to about the middle of the car. I planned on going to the back to see what could have been wrong with my car when it hit me. Why is he still honking at me when I'm out of my car? That's odd. Then he gets out of his truck. That's when I knew something just wasn't right. I jumped back in my car and sped off. The next exit was 45 miles or so away. He followed me the entire time. I take the first exit and go to a crowded grocery store with a laundromat next to it. There was an ambulance parked at the laundromat with its lights flashing, and I was next to it. I figured if there was an ambulance, then eventually a police officer should come. The man stayed in his truck in the grocery store parking lot, watching me the entire time. I was terrified. I did not want to get out of my car and felt like an idiot if I would have had to tell someone what happened. I waited about an hour and he finally left. After he left, I waited a little longer before continuing my drive back to Arizona. I was paranoid and watchful for any red trucks the entire time. Fast forward about 5 or 6 years. I'm watching Unsolved Mysteries or some similar type crime show with my hubby at the time. He knew what happened as we were dating when it happened. And what story pops up? One about a man on that exact stretch of highway with a red truck that used those exact tactics to get a few women to pull over and murdered them. I really am glad my gut told me something was wrong and to get back in my car and drive.
Don't sleep in your car.
Let me start by saying I really enjoy driving, and I will often be on the road for hours just listening to music and getting lost. So, more often than not, I will sleep in my car on the side of a country road. I don't like it when I'm the passenger though, so I always go alone. Usually I sleep for a bit, wake up, then go home without incident. There has been a couple of times when a deer has startled me, or even a person knocking on my window to make sure I was okay was met with a scream. But what happened last night takes the absolute cake. I took my dogs up to a really nice walk I had read about online. It was about a 5-hour drive, and I had planned to drive for an hour at a time, explore for a bit, then keep going so the dogs didn't get restless or bored. I had taken plenty of food and water and was planning to be gone for about a day, which I was, and was going to park in a popular parking spot that caravanners and the like tend to stay overnight. It was lovely, and myself and the dogs had a really good time. We arrived at our sleeping destination and found that there wasn't any space to park. The bays weren't laid out, so you just kind of had to use your common sense and find a spot where you weren't blocking anyone in. The parking area was free and could only contain about 10 cars vans without it being too tight. I was a little annoyed, but hey ho. It was a very rural area, so I carried on for a little while and pulled into a lay-by to rest before I drove home. I let the dogs out to do their business and then went to sleep thinking nothing of it. To describe where I had parked, it was opposite a little cottage, but not directly in front of the ite, and there were plenty of trees, so I didn't feel as though I was intruding on the owners in any way. I felt very safe. For some reason, I was having trouble nodding off. Usually I slept like a baby in my car because it is very spacious and comfortable, and as silly as it may sound to some, I genuinely thought I had nothing to worry about. That was until a long, high-pitched scratching sound woke me and the dogs up at around 11 p.m., just after I drifted off. The dogs went nuts, as they usually do at the drop of a hat, and I was still in a confused daze when I saw a very tall, middle-aged man dragging what I thought was a key around the perimeter of my car. He walked very slowly and didn't take his eyes off of me the entire time. He also had a very malicious grin on his face. Horrified, I cranked my chair up and started the car, ready to floor it, but he had made his way to the front of my bonnet, and trees were blocking me from reversing. This was when I saw that he was holding a butcher's knife. He held it up and sort of waved it at me. I screamed and laid on the horn, and my dogs had leapt over the back seat and were practically frothing at the mouth, but it didn't seem to faze him. This lasted about 10 to 15 seconds, not long, and then he just slowly walked away across the road and into the cottage. I drove home without stopping. I'm never doing that again. Thanks for ruining it for me. Genuinely terrifying man. And thanks for ruining my paintwork. I don't know if he was just trying to teach me a lesson for parking outside his house or what. But either way, I will probably be scarred for life.
Came across an incredibly creepy family a while back.
Okay, I never really post anything on Reddit, mostly just reading, so please excuse me if I do or say anything that isn't common courtesy here. In around 2018-2019, I, 25F, at the time was 18-19, was living in Nebraska, where I grew up. I lived in the largest city in NE, but it was still essentially surrounded by corn and wheat fields. The city was expanding, so rich folks started building huge houses with giant properties on the edge of town as things proceeded to grow. All of that being said, I had a good friend whose parents' house was one of those big ones right on the blurring line between the fields and the city. My friends and I were constantly hanging out at his place because it was fun. They had tons of property to ride 4x4s on, a hot tub, a huge living room for us to watch sports and have reality TV binge sessions, etc. Plus his parents were super cool and we could drink out there as long as we stayed at the house. It was tons of fun, even though I was quite scared of the dark, so I would just not go outside after a certain time because there was little lighting and the nearest neighbor was about a mile away. I always felt a weird energy driving to from his place if it was late at night, but never had anything happen until one night. The drive out there was a long winding two-way road that had thick trees on both sides, and you pass one of the city's largest cemeteries on the way. Barely any lighting, of course, besides the street lamps every once in a while, and very little traffic. It's all inherently a bit creepy, and I'll admit to having sped through this section of road many times to get through it as quickly as possible. This specific night was perfect spring weather, so I was driving with my windows down listening to music, and it was around 8 p.m. I was coming around one of the curves in the road when I had to essentially slam my brakes on. Right in front of me in the middle of the road, maybe 50 yards away, was what looked like a family. Again, picture a completely pitch black road with thick forest on both sides and only my headlights to show what's in front of me. This was a family of 4, a tall, slim woman, an average height-weight man, a child, short hair but couldn't tell the gender based on the clothing and couldn't see their face, maybe around 8 years old, and the mother was pushing a fucking stroller. That is the part that sticks in my brain the most. Their clothes looked normal, not tattered but not nice. They were all facing away from me, walking casually in the middle of the street the same direction I was heading. The hairs on my arms immediately stood up. I came to a stop in the road, obviously, and just sat there for a moment. They seemed to be completed, unaffected by me, and didn't even turn their heads slightly, nor did they attempt to move out of my way. I literally thought I was going insane, or that I was dreaming. It was so surreal. Before I really had time to fully process and register what I was seeing and how truly strange it was, They all, at the same time, stopped walking and very slowly turned to face my car. This gave me an incredibly unsettling feeling, like I needed to go. I honestly didn't even give myself enough time to look at their faces as they turned. I immediately threw my car in reverse and sent it backwards for probably a full 20 seconds before flipping a U-turn, nearly running myself off the road and booking it the other direction. I've never felt terror like that in my life. I checked my rearview mirror probably 1,000 times before getting to a main road and never saw a glimpse of them. In fact, I never saw a glimpse of them ever again. I tried asking my friend and his family about it, only to essentially feel like I was insane because of the way they looked at me. Every time I tell this story, I get one of 3 reactions. They immediately think I'm fucking cuckoo, think I'm lying, or have had something sort of similar happen to them. I really don't care if no one believes me, honestly. It was, and still is, the creepiest thing to ever happen to me. I think about it all the time. It was either some weird-ass family trying to scare the shit out of someone, a distraction for an attempted robbery, assault, etc., or it was something more sinister. I'm going to tell myself for probably the rest of my life that it was the first option.
Had an incredibly frightening experience last night.
So last night I was at a classmate's house working on a group project we have due tomorrow. I live in an apartment in the town where our university is located, and my classmate lives at his parents' house, which is in the foothills just outside of town. In order to get to the house, you have to drive along a relatively secluded and narrow 2-lane road for about 5 to 6 miles. We started working on the project at about 6 p.m., and I ended up hanging around for a while after we had finished our working. So, I left his house pretty late, at about 11, and started down the road back towards town. I didn't realize how tough it would be to navigate the road at night. There were no streetlights, and the road was unkept and riddled with potholes. On top of this, I had no cell service, so I had to drive very slowly to make sure I didn't blow out one of my tires, since I had used my spare a couple of weeks back. I figure I was about 3 miles from the house when I rounded a tight corner and saw a pickup truck with a camper shell parked diagonally across the road. The manner in which it was parked completely impeded my path, and I couldn't drive around it because there was a gully on both sides of the road. The only way for me to go at this point was backward, where there was a pull-off that I could use to turn my car around. At first I couldn't see inside the cab, but when I turned on my high beams, I saw that there was a man slouched over in the driver's seat, his head resting against the steering wheel as if he had been knocked out after a bad accident. I immediately sensed something was wrong. The way his car had just coincidentally come to rest in a position that totally blocked the road was a big red flag for me. I had heard stories of people playing dead in the road as a way to lure unsuspecting people out of their cars so they could rob them. I decided fuck this shit and elected to go back to my classmate's house and explain what was going on. I threw the car into reverse and kept my eyes darting back and forth between my rear view and the truck. I looked and saw that I was almost to the pull-off where I could turn around. When I looked back, my heart skipped about 5 beats. The man who had been slouched over in the driver's seat was now walking at my car at a hurried pace, while a few other men jumped out of the camper shell and started moving towards me as well. I panicked and accelerated backwards into the pull-off, which messed up the undercarriage of my car pretty bad. As I put it into drive, the guy was already at my passenger side door, tugging on the handle, which, thank the Lord, was locked. I only caught a brief glimpse of him, but his face appeared to be scabbed and leathery, definitely a meth head or some sort of drug abuser. I sped away and didn't slow down at all until I reached the house, constantly checking my rear view to see if they were following. Thankfully, they didn't tail me, and when I reached the house, I explained what had happened to my classmate, and we called the cops. I was grateful that my buddy's parents were kind enough to let me stay the night. They didn't find anyone on the road matching the description, but I filed an incident report, and they told me they would be on the lookout for similar vehicles and suspicious activity. But holy shit, I'm still so shook up over it. I keep getting the same adrenaline rush I got when I saw the guy charging me whenever I think about it.
I'm confident I would have become a missing persons case.
I apologize in advance since I'm not a good writer, but I'll do my best to share my experience. To better paint the picture, here's a description of myself at the time of this incident. 3 years ago. 5'5", 26-year-old woman, medium-length bleach blonde hair, curvy 175 pounds, wearing black high-waisted tights and a pink crop top. 3 years ago, I was walking home late at night from my friend's house. It was dark, and at the time I lived in a rough part of a large city. I've had many sketchy situations that I have gotten myself out of. So I guess I felt sort of invincible, like nothing truly scary could happen to me. When I walk alone, I always stay very alert and aware of my surroundings for my own safety, just in case. About halfway home and roughly 10 minutes to my apartment, I noticed a van started tailing me. I was used to this since in my city it's very common for a young woman in a rough area to get propositioned for sex. It's embarrassing how desensitized to this I was. I did my usual and crossed the road so that I would be walking beside the traffic heading in the other direction. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. The van then turned down a side street, then back onto the road I was on, and pulled up to me. At this point, I still wasn't scared. Again, this has happened so many times, and it never mattered if I was wearing something that showed more skin, or if I was wearing a winter coat zipped from just below my chin all the way down to my ankles. That area is notorious for that type of activity. I decided to be firm and told the person sternly, "I'm not interested." I noticed there were 2 men in the van. They looked almost identical and may have been twins or brothers. Both men had a very, very dark complexion, dark eyes and short dark hair. The van didn't move. I was super annoyed and crossed the road again to get away. At this point, I figured this would be enough for them to stop following me. They didn't. They kept circling back every time I crossed the road. I've never had to put that much effort into getting a horny pervert to leave me alone. So, this is when I started feeling unsafe. They zipped by me at the speed the traffic was flowing in, and I yelled for them to fuck off. I thought it finally worked. It had been 3 minutes and I hadn't seen the van, so I thought I was in the clear. Just in case, I pulled my phone out and was getting ready to call my sister that I lived with. Just then, the van pulled up to me very quickly, and before I could even blink, one of the men jumped out of the van, opened the back door and approached me quickly in an aggressive manner as if he was about to scoop me up and throw me into the vehicle. The traffic in that area is very inconsistent. It was dead, and I imagine that is what they were waiting for. Just as the man was about to place his hands on me, I tilted my phone and said, "You are being filmed in my live video chat. I gave my friends your license plate number, and the police have been notified." I was so scared, but I didn't let that show. I stayed as calm as I could. The man paused like he was considering if I was bluffing or telling the truth, so I tilted the phone more, as if to give the fake audience a better look at him. He then jumped into the van and they sped off. I have never been the same since that night. I'm afraid of walking alone now, even in the daytime.
The one day I woke up late may have saved my life.
I've told this story in other places on other accounts before, but it bears repeating One day, when I was an elementary schooler, I think probably 3rd or 4th grade, I was awoken by my mom in a rush. She had overslept, and since she always woke me up in the morning, this meant that I too overslept, and now there was just no way I was going to be ready for school early enough to get on the school bus. If I recall correctly, school started at 8 a.m., and my bus pickup time was 7 a.m., but it was already like 6:40 or something, and I was still in my pajamas and hadn't even had breakfast yet. So Mom decided that today we would just tell the bus driver to go on ahead and she would take me to school, which would give me plenty of time to get ready. So I'm sitting there at the dining room table eating breakfast, still in my pajamas, and it's now about 6:50. We hear the bus pull up about 10 minutes earlier than usual. My mom peeks her head out of the door into the foggy morning and waves the bus on. She closes the door and comes back inside, but the bus doesn't pull away. There's a knock at the door, and Mom opens it to find a man in a bus driver uniform. He explains that he's a substitute driver because the regular driver called in sick. He says he knows he's a few minutes early since he wanted to get an early start on the route since he didn't know it well. Mom explains to him that she was going to take me to school since we woke up late. He gets visibly upset and says that he can wait a few minutes since he's already running ahead of schedule. My mom insists that no, I won't be ready to go in a few minutes, and tells him to go on ahead. He seemed angry about this but turned around and got back in the bus and left. I returned to eating my breakfast and still don't have my school clothes on at this point. But at 7 a.m. sharp, another bus pulls up to my house. Mom thinks this is weird and goes outside to talk to them. She comes back inside looking terrified, but doesn't really say anything about it and tells me to finish getting ready for school. At the time, I didn't know what happened, but Mom would end up telling me a few years later. When she went to this second bus, she found that it was being driven by my regular bus driver, and it was full of all the other kids that are usually on the route. The other bus was empty, by the way. Mom asks the driver about the substitute driver and about him calling in sick. I never called in sick. There is no substitute driver on my route. He says, the driver immediately called dispatch in a panic and told my mom to go inside and call the police, which she did without me knowing, and report this incident. There was absolutely no one doing my driver's route that day. Whoever this was most likely a kidnapper who had targeted me. I never heard anything about it again. Not even if someone else had ended up being picked up by this mysterious fake bus driver. But chances are, had I gotten on that bus, I would have never made it to school or back home. And if Mom hadn't overslept on that specific day, I would have been on that bus.
Almost kidnapped in Miami because of Instagram.
My best friend is an influencer, not big time, but with a big enough following to get free shit, and has gotten 2 sponsored trips. She still works a full-time job, but does the IG thing on the side, mostly because of the perks. She's not big enough to live off this yet. Anyway, this was her first trip. A little boutique hotel from Miami contacted her via IG and DMs and offered her an all-expenses paid trip to Miami for Memorial Weekend 2018 in exchange for her to be in the hotel and take pics and do a couple of stories. She was told she could bring a female friend with her if she wanted to, and everything would be covered for her. This was her first time doing this, so at the time she wasn't really sure of how it worked. They sent her a bogus contract for her to sign, and it said she'd be responsible for paying for her plane ticket to Miami, and that she'd be reimbursed for it later. This was to prevent a no-show, meaning the influencer gets the ticket purchased by the hotel, and influencer never shows up. It seemed reasonable. She invited me, gay dude, instead of a female friend because she was nervous about the whole thing. We figured it wouldn't be a big deal. And worst case scenario, they don't want to pay for my plane ticket. She'd just cover it for me. And that's it. We were supposed to be picked up by the hotel at the airport, so the day comes and we arrive to Miami. There's a guy holding a sign with her last name, and the paper has the hotel logo. We are greeted and we are escorted to a black SUV. Here's where it gets weird. As soon as we are going to get in the car, the driver is visibly upset. We thought he was talking to the guy who walked us over, but he was talking to my friend. He had a very thick accent and was wearing dark shades. He was telling my friend that she was not allowed to bring her boyfriend, me, and that she said it was two girls. Hotel told me 2 girls, no 1 girl, 1 guy, 2 girls. He was demanding to see where the other girl was. We were speechless and confused. The guy who walked us to the car looked annoyed, got in the passenger seat and started to fight with the driver in Portuguese. It wasn't Spanish. Then he turns to us and asks where the other girl is at. My friend tells them, very upset by now, that there is no other girl, that she is at insert name, and that I'm just a friend coming with her on the trip. The big guy in the passenger seats gets out, tosses our luggage out of the car, and says something like, "This is some fucking bullshit," gets in the car, and they take off. That was it. We were in shock. Utter and complete shock. My friend immediately emails Melissa, the PR person we had been in contact through email with, to tell her what happened. No response. We decide to take a cab and show up to the hotel. When we show up is when everything made sense. The hotel had been rebranded and had a completely different name, owner and staff. We show them the IG and is indeed the IG of the hotel it used to be, but not the new one. They never contacted us. They never did anything. Whoever was in charge of the old IG account for the old hotel did, or whoever got a hold of it did. Mind you, this was a somewhat big hotel account with 10,000 followers. It was real, but upon further inspection we realized the pics were really old, and so were the posts. My friend felt like an idiot and would not stop crying. We called the police, met up with a detective. Nothing ever came out of it. They investigated who was running the account before or who had access to it. None of the people who used to run that account had anything to do with it. Nothing ever came out of this. It's upsetting and scary to know that whoever wanted to abduct my friend or any other girls by using this old hotel Instagram knows who my friend is. That IG has since been deleted, and we never heard anything from anyone ever again. But to think my friend would have been kidnapped had she gone with another girl instead of me sends chills down my spine.
Rideshare driver turned off the app and refused to tell us where he was going.
This happened about a year ago, while I was living in a major Midwestern city. My partner and I were in a long-distance relationship at the time, and they had flown out for the weekend to celebrate my birthday. We both love animals, and I had decided to take them to the zoo before going out for a nice dinner. I don't have a car, but had recently got a free invite for a rideshare service called Via, similar to Lyft and Uber, which I decided to use. I called us a car, and we wait outside. It's important to note that the city I lived in was generally liberal and LGBT friendly, at least until you got to the suburbs. My partner and I are a gay, interracial couple, which has led to some weird encounters when we were living in a more rural area, but nothing that felt immediately threatening. The car pulls up and we say hello to the driver and ask how his day is going. He nods at us but doesn't say anything. I didn't really think anything of it. Some people aren't very chatty, so we start discussing the logistics for the evening. We were pretty wrapped up in our conversation. We hadn't seen each other in 2 months, but I soon noticed that the driver was taking a strange route. The zoo was directly north of my house, about 12 minutes away, and he turned onto the on-ramp for a highway going south, which is an industrial area. I don't drive, like I said, so I assumed he either made a wrong turn or was taking a shortcut. We continued chatting for a little over 5 minutes and we're still on the freeway, heading in what is obviously the opposite direction. I checked the Via app to see if I had ordered a group ride. Maybe he was picking up someone else. That's when I noticed a stark difference between the map open on his dashboard and my phone application. The Via app clearly showed us far away from the planned route, while whatever map was open on his phone was directing him to another location far enough away that it wasn't even visible on his screen. At this point, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach, and I can tell my partner is on edge as well. They tried to get his attention, asking if he had gotten the location correct, and he muttered something under his breath and continued driving. We were now 40 minutes from the zoo and had no idea where we were heading. We asked him again where we were driving and he said he didn't speak English. However, my partner's parents are from the same country and they later told me it was obvious he was pretending not to understand what we were saying. My phone was low on battery now. It had begun to snow, and we were outside city limits, quickly approaching the edge of Via's service range. At this point, both of us began loudly telling him to turn around and drop us back off at the house. I pulled up the app on my phone. There was no service number, but I told him I was contacting Via about the error right now. He immediately pulled onto a freeway exit. It was barren, other than a strip mall with a Verizon and a grocery store. He cut the engine, turns around, and in clear English tells us to get out of his car and that the ride is over. I tried to see what navigating app he had opened, but he immediately closed out the screen. Luckily, we could walk to the Verizon store, where we were able to charge our phones, and I found someone to pick us up, as there were no ride services nearby. We were so far away that it took almost an hour for our friend to arrive. Once we got back, neither of us felt like going out anymore. I tried to report the incident to Via, and they said he had confirmed our drop-off at the zoo through the app, which conflicted with my GPS tracking. All the rep did was apologize and give me some credit for a future ride, which I didn't use. I don't know where he was planning to take us, but my partner comes from a very conservative and religious country and believes something very bad could have happened,